Welcome to the Vibrant Couple. Today I have invited Taylor Johnson, Integrative Health Coach for Men. Welcome. And before we talk, I want to say that yesterday I tripped on my shoelace all by myself and I tripped on my nose. So that's why I have a couple band-aids. Taylor, welcome. Please say more about what you do.
Thanks for the introduction. Sorry about your nose. And I would say, I call myself an integrative sex coach for men, not an integrative health coach, because while health is a part of it, I primarily focus on helping men improve their sex lives.
Thank you for correcting me.
The simple ones, so like overcoming premature ejaculation, overcoming erectile dysfunction, sexual anxiety, all that stuff, into the whole just how to feel better about sex as a man in general, how to feel more confident, how to actually go after what you want, how to have the kinds of sex that you want, how to get rid of shame, all that kind of stuff, And as a society, as men in this society, and as a man myself, we're programmed with a lot of beliefs and societal structures that say, oh, you shouldn't ask for help, or you should be able to figure out how to do everything on your own, or you shouldn't show weakness, or especially in the realm of sex, But the truth is, lots of men actually aren't having the kinds of sex that they want, and lots of men are experiencing problems in their sex life. And so I used to be that guy too. I used to struggle tremendously with my sex life, tremendously. I even avoided women for an extended period of time when I was younger because I was afraid of being the guy that would have sex with them and then it would end very badly because that's what would happen. And so I get it. And I went on a long journey of personal growth and practice to get to where I am now. And now I'm excited to help people because I think it's really important. And for me, it's also really fun and meaningful.
How is your current sex life? Are you happy? Do you feel good with your sexual expression?
I'd say it's funny. I think if you ask anybody that, there will always be some sort of room for improvement that comes up, and it's my own practice to appreciate what's there. And yes, I would say my sex life now is incomprehensibly improved compared to what it used to be. I can have sex for a long, long time, an hour if I want to, 2 hours or 10 minutes. I can experience different types of orgasm in my body, non-ejaculatory orgasm, full body orgasm. I can have wild, animalistic sex or slow sensual lovemaking or primal, fucking or any of the, anything in between, explore kink, explore BDSM. And I don't feel shame around that anymore. So there's been a lot of liberation that I've gone through, you could say. And so, it's great. Thumbs up, thumbs up.
I'm making the assumption that your sexual partner also feels you more present, more connected, more in tune, and attuned to her and her sexual needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in relationship with my partner for 5 years now, and just like anybody who's been in a long-term relationship, you will know that things can ebb and flow. And we've gone through periods of amazing regular sex and then periods of no sex or minimal sex while we're working on some personal things in our dynamic. And we really see relationship as an opportunity to practice, and work on our own personal stuff to come back together. So right now we are in a wave of how would I call it? Juicy, delectable improvements that feel really fun.
That's wonderful. And I'm assuming that you know that at some point there'll be a down wave or however you call that. And then you'll be working with your partner on what that is and how to create the next wave up.
Yeah, working with my partner, but then also doing work just with myself. I'll start with a fundamental piece, which is that most people who are in long-term relationship who end up living together, I live in this house with my partner, we bought it together. Most people unintentionally fall into more of a roommate dynamic or a housemate dynamic or a domestic partner task accomplisher dynamic, and many of those things are useful, but it's often at the expense of the lovership dynamic or the sexual dynamic. And in many ways, these are two different categories of things. It's almost two different modes, two different ways of being. And so one piece of self-work that I really had to do was to notice how I was approaching my partner in a variety of just different scenarios in our house, like in the kitchen, in her bedroom, in the living room. Like, am I walking in with the intention of connection and with some sort of directional focus for either connection or conversation or intimacy? Or am I just mindlessly approaching her and there's a sort of enmeshment that happens there because, oh, we just live in the same couch. Oh, there she is on the couch. Like, I'll just go sit next to her because whatever. And that's not inherently a problem, but it can become a problem if that becomes one of the more fundamental ways, default ways that you interact, is just sort of accidentally falling into the same place at the same time together. So I had to really start identifying those times when I was doing that and taking a step back and asking myself, ooh, what is it that I actually want to cultivate here? What do I actually want to bring to the relationship? How do I want to craft our connection? And this is, I don't want to say I have this perfected. Like, this is something I'm actively working on right now. But it's a really important piece for anyone who's in long-term relationship, is to consider, like, what is the art that you are creating out of your relationship by how you approach and interact with your partner on a regular basis.
And I'm pretty sure that your partner is very appreciative of you being more aware, conscious, and intentional, whatever your intention is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference as a woman to be on the receiving end of option one. A man is just, maybe he's just tired from working a little bit and he's just like, oh, I think I'll just flop down next to you and drink some, water or tea or soda or whatever.
Not sexy.
No, versus a man who takes a moment by himself, maybe has some water, gets a little food, and then decides, like, oh, I actually want to bring some intentional focus to my connection with her. So I'm going to grab some water. I'm going to take a moment, take a couple breaths, and go in there and walk towards her and kiss her and bring that kind of energy and that kind of presence. And that's like it's a night and day difference to be on the receiving end of those two things.
One of the things I'm hearing from the women I work with is they hate when men come to them seeking validation. When a man feels self-validated and he comes with whatever he comes with, it's much easier to respond to whether they want what he's offering or not.
Yeah. I mean, there's there's so many different dynamics at play there. Yeah, let me give you another example of one. So it can be common in relationship for people to just touch each other. You just touch each other when you're in the kitchen or touch each other in the bedroom. And touch is great. Touch is one of my primary love languages. But again, it's the quality of touch. So what I noticed was there was a certain point in our relationship where I was touching my partner's butt more often. And I was doing so from a place of not actually celebrating and cherishing the full sexiness of who she is. That is to say, I was taking her for granted. And I would just do sort of like light casual slaps here and there and like grabs in the kitchen. And it's all playful and everything. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I was actually killing the charge in our relationship. Instead of some light playful grabs or taps from time to time, like if I saved my touches for that part of her body for a more intentional moment of connection, then it really shifted our dynamic and added something beautiful and fiery and helped to bring us more from the category of housemates into the lover category.
So listeners, I want to bring attention to what Taylor just said, which is about creating polarity. When we live together for a long time, we basically diminish our polarity. And it's very much like two magnets. When you have two magnets that are strongly charged and you put them in the right direction, there is an inevitable attraction to each other. But when you become closer to each other and you don't actively work on that charge, basically there could be a very pleasurable rubbing of genitals, but there is not that spark, that magnetic attraction to each other.
Yeah, that's basically it. And I don't want to to be clear, I'm not trying to demonize touch. Like, I love touch. I also love cuddling, and I also love just laying around together with our arms intertwined, watching a movie from time to time. It's about the intentionality and what are the habits that we fall into with each other. And if those habits are conducive of a great, fiery, beautiful sex life, awesome. But if they're not, then it's worth evaluating, and bringing some more intentionality there.
What do you do to enhance who you are as a man and enhance your sexual relationship with your partner?
I work out regularly. I see a therapist regularly to help work on my own stuff. I'm part of a men's group. I regularly connect with the men in my life. I try to be physically active. I do a whole bunch of stuff. I try to eat well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And with the self-pleasure piece, like, I try to do that just without shame. And I try to just have fun with it. And I'd say one of the biggest things that I do in self-pleasure that makes one of the biggest differences, and it's going to sound really simple, is breathe. Like, breathe intentionally, and not just passively or not softly, but I bring a certain level. It's almost like a martial arts practice of breath during self-pleasure and also during sex. And most people don't recognize just how powerful the breath is for a variety of different things. Like, if you're breathing through your nose and you're breathing deeply and powerfully, try that 20 times. If everybody listening right now, and if we both did that, our subjective experience of the moment would be profoundly different than it is right now. Like, we would feel sensations in our body. We would feel tingles. We would feel a different flavor of awareness. That, sure, there's some of that right now, but it would be a more honed in kind of, like, there would be a potency to it, And so when I do that during self-pleasure, or when I do that during sex, like, that does a variety of things. It helps to get me more into my body, more out of my head, helps to increase erection strength, and it helps to make it so that the pleasure that I am experiencing in my genitals, in my penis during sex, it doesn't feel as hyper-focused there. It's more easy for that to spread into the rest of my body. And if that's a new concept for you as a listener, let me just explain what I mean by that. Like, there's a lot of guys I work with who struggle with premature ejaculation. I used to struggle with premature ejaculation a lot. One of the many causes of that, and there could be a variety depending on the man, there's lots of different reasons that could happen, but one of them is because most people hyper focus on their penis during self-pleasure or masturbation. Porn reinforces this too. And so there's this narrow window of awareness that's focused on sensation just in the penis. But when you start to train your mind to expand that window of awareness beyond just your penis, then you start to realize, oh, I'm having a pleasure response in my hips too. Oh, I'm having a pleasure response in my belly and my legs and my lower back. And that's what I mean. Like, when you're spreading the pleasure, there's a spread of awareness of the pleasure that's happening, but you're just not even paying attention to it because you've trained yourself to focus so much on the penis, And when you spread out your awareness like that and you start to experience pleasure everywhere else, it reduces the pressure of the pleasure in your penis. It doesn't reduce the pleasure, but it reduces the pressure, so it doesn't push you towards ejaculation, so you can last longer and make love for as long as you want. Like, breath, 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 breath. And ultimately, you're speaking about the art and the practice of attunement. Like, how do you attune to your partner, which is different from merging and enmeshing. Like, attunement is, you are a sovereign person, your partner is a sovereign person, but there's a channel of awareness and connection that's happening. There's contact between you and the person, either energetic or physical, where you're with them in the moment,
Please say more, because most men do not have any experience of that. Porn is on a separate screen. Men are told to perform. And so at the beginning, there is very little idea that the connection itself, the play, instead of, I have to do foreplay for at least 20 minutes, first not touch her genitals, then I can touch her genitals a little bit, then I can touch them more. Most men are running those scripts. And so please say more about the pleasure of connection, the pleasure of play together, the pleasure of exploration.
Yeah, well, I would want to also say that I also like those scripts when done with intention, and that's the biggest difference. It's like, am I falling into this pattern? Am I doing this thing in sex because it's just what I do and it's my pattern and I'm just following the same thing I've always done? Or am I doing this because this is how I'm choosing to make art out of sex in the moment, you know? And so you can run through something that would look like the typical patterns with consciousness, and it can be a very sexy experience. So I just want to say that up front. Like, I like fingering, I like hand jobs, I like oral sex, blowjob, like all the things. I think that's great. And oftentimes there is a progression, that leads to penetrative sex. And for people who have sex with women, that makes sense too, because if you look at the curve of arousal on charts, like men get aroused very quickly, women take longer. So of course, all of those things are still going to need to happen in some way. And the joy of connection, I do actually believe that most men can feel and know when connection is happening, right? Like when you look in somebody's eyes and there's that moment of like, oh shit, or like, oh wow, there's connection in that moment. What I do believe is that there are a lot of men, and my younger self included, I'm not separate from this, a lot of men out there who have watched a lot of porn, who haven't worked the muscle of connection as much, and for many guys, it actually can be a scary thing. And most people wouldn't admit that, but there's like this, oh, I'm coming into contact with the person. Oh God, like what now? Like I better look away and just start fingering her or doing something different, because there's a vulnerability in that, and again, as men, like we've been programmed by society to not be vulnerable. But there's actually a great pleasure and beauty in being in connection and vulnerable in a sexual experience.
Can a man be fully in his masculine and be vulnerable?
I'm going to turn the question back on you. What does it mean to you when you say, can a man be fully in his masculine?
It's very interesting because I'm hearing lots of, women need to surrender, and I'm hearing, lots of BDSM, of submitting play. And my own experience is that when I'm in my masculine, it is surrendering to my masculine.
What does that mean?
It is going to a place in which I feel strong, I feel connected, I feel ready to play. If I'm in my head and running scripts and worried and shame, unless, I process it, then I'm not able to be present.
Would you call that part of you that's unable to be present, would you call that masculine?
No.
What would you call it?
So that's inability to be present. It's a resistance to be in the moment. It's, running, letting my shame and embarrassment and, all those words that so many men know too well, and letting those trips run instead of just relaxing and being in the moment. And I'm noticing that has a big, big impact on my partner.
So would you call the time when you're in your head and not as present, would you call that feminine?
No, I call that collapsed masculine.
Okay, collapsed masculine.
I have a strong feminine. I have practiced both masculine and feminine. So for me, it is not I have both on tap when I want. I had a very interesting experience a few years ago. I was on a date, and the woman asked me lots of questions about polarity, and I invited her to dance, to use dance as a demonstration. And so I told her, how about I spin you one turn, and then you spin me one turn? And just after we did, she stopped and was totally dumbfounded. She said, wow, it was so hard to spin, and it was so easy to spin you. And so it's really funny because I have a very stiff body and she's a dance teacher. So, and so that was more that she was struggling with surrendering into her own pleasure of being spun. And from the moment she started spinning me, I was in my feminine enjoyment of being spun. And that was wonderful.
Yeah.
Collapse masculine is more where I see most men being when they start. They have been told, a man, is not a wuss, a man is not this, a man is not that, a man is not that, keep your feelings to yourself, don't share your feelings, otherwise, people will feel you vulnerable and abuse you and on and on and on. So learning to basically work on those scripts and let go of all the shame that is, keeping them alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good practice to work on all these areas. It's my opinion that using the terms masculine and feminine in these contexts actually creates, I see usefulness because it helps people identify certain traits. I think it also creates a lot of confusion for people. And I think it puts men in their heads, like, am I doing a feminine thing right now? Am I doing a masculine thing right now? How is this going to relate to the woman? Is she being feminine? Is she being masculine? And in my mind, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you could label it whatever you want. Like, those labels get confusing. But what you're talking about when you're doing the spinning example, there is a very clear dynamic going on there. There's a leader and there's a follower. There's a doing to, and then there's a done to. I can be spun by a woman and I can be following, and I don't necessarily think that puts me in my feminine. Like, I think that receptivity is a really beautiful, potent part of being a man, and the ability to be able to be led, that can be a very masculine thing. And I think that for a lot of men, labeling it that feminine actually diminishes it and diminishes the value of that, and creates a scenario where they're less likely to do it and find the beauty and find the power in that.
I'm in full agreement, and basically there is so much abuse and garbage around, masculine, feminine, men, women, even, what manly is and what girly is. There's not even a word for womanly, or is very, very seldom used. I'm in agreement, and what I find is that learning to practice each of these is really helpful, because in the moment I can show up one way or the other.
I think dance is one of the greatest ways of exploring this kind of stuff. If I could prescribe something to people in general, I would say you got to try dancing. Go take some partner dance classes, because so much of that can carry over into the bedroom and in the relationship. And if you take any partner dance classes from, I guess I haven't done all the different modalities, but a lot of different instructors will say, hey, it's actually really important for you to learn both parts. Learn both parts, learn how to lead, but also learn how to follow. And both of those dynamics are crucially important to understanding how the dance actually happens, so you can choose how to do either one of them.
I totally agree. I've been practicing tango a little bit for the last year and a half. And tango is wonderful for me because I'm terrible with my feet. So tango is just walking. And tango is also a place where there is very clearly a leader and a follower. And several times I have volunteered to be the follower, to learn how it is to be a follower. And it's so different.
It is. And it's also, for any man who decides to try that for the first couple times, it can be very confronting, and very challenging. And then ultimately, it's been my experience that the more I do that, the better leader I become, because the more understanding I have for the entire scenario, and I have an embodied, felt sense of what it's like to be on the other side. So that attunement piece that we were talking about earlier, my capacity for attunement is much higher because of studying and practicing in both of those dynamics.
Could you give us some sort of a timeline, a man who has done no work, maybe he's young or maybe he's older but has done no work and just get started, he likely watches some porn, he likely has a lot of shame, likely he has learned, don't do this, don't do this, don't do that, but very little on do this, do that. And then as men evolve, where they pay more attention to attunement, connection, building polarity. So how would you, and maybe what are your different offerings at, with men who are just beginning compared to men who have done quite a bit of work?
Well, I'd say for any man out there who's thinking about doing some sort of investigation or work into their sex life or into their relationship, like, yes, awesome. Like, good job. Nice. Like, please do that. And know that it's like, there's a lot of stuff out there. You could start in any number of places. And I think starting somewhere is just what you got to do. Start somewhere and see how it works for you. And if it doesn't work, try something else. Like there's, for almost everybody out there, there is the opportunity to become better, more skilled, more capable at most things. And should you want to do that with your sex life, there's a whole variety of options, And so it's hard to say with a big brush stroke, like make a broad generalization here, but I would say start somewhere. And if we would work together, or I imagine if they would work with you, the question would be, well, what do you want? Like that would be my first question. Like, what do you want? What do you want to experience? And what are you unhappy with currently? And let's start from there. Like identify those two things.
Let's take a couple in their early 40s in which they've been together for a while. They had a wonderful, infatuation phase at the beginning. They are becoming much more roommates with some benefits. And let's assume that both of them like sex. There's some people who don't, but let's assume they do, and they want more, and the man comes to you.
I would ask first, like, are you both wanting more sex? Like, do you know that your partner is also wanting more sex? Like what's the status of your relationship? And I would ask a lot of relational questions. Like, what is the quality of your relationship? What is the quality of your home life? How much time do you spend together? And what do you do during that time? What else do you do in your life? And what are some possible stressors for your partner? Like, and how are you, here's a big question that really kind of gets in there for a lot of guys. How are you responsible for what's happening in your relationship right now? And how are you responsible for creating the relationship that you're actually not so happy about, or that you would like to be different? Because a lot of people can fall into this sort of like, oh, this happened to me mindset, or like, oh, I'm the victim here of my own relationship or whatever. But when in fact, like, no, you've created this, and it's okay. You've both created this, but it's really important to be able to see and own those pieces. Because when you do that, then you can start to figure out, oh, well, maybe I should stop doing that one thing so much. Like, so those would be some of the first questions I would ask.
I was married for 25 years, and if I look at how things fell apart over the years, it's all my responsibility. I was not present enough. I was not aware enough. I was not skilled enough to create a better relationship.
Yeah, and I think I also want to say, if there's anybody listening who maybe is on the fence about your relationship, or you have been in a long-term relationship and you got out, and you're having the thought of, well, if I was more present or skillful, then our relationship wouldn't have ended. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. I think there are scenarios in which both people are actually very intentional with what's going on in their relationship and have a high communication ability, and still the relationship has run its course. And like, that's okay.
So basically, some breakups are good.
Oh yeah.
We're done with someone. The relationship had left its course, and it's time to move on.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus, if I'm about to turn 40, if I stayed in relationship with people I was in relationship with from my early 20s, like, eek, like, and of course there's the possibility that we could have grown together and gone through all of our growth processes and of course that reality is there too. But I have grown a lot and learned a lot from my different relationships that I'm able to bring into where I am today with my partner in a relationship that's not perfect, but we're both aware of the imperfection and both committed to showing up and working on it.
I'm seeing a smile on your face as you talk about your relationship. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
There are women listening to us. Would you have any advice for them on how to relearn to be with men, relearn to be with their partner? You know, many women have learned that they have to basically massage males' fragile egos, not understanding how shame is, of course, terrible for women, but shame is something that very few men can withstand. One of the reasons for men collapsing is from shame. So, any advice for women on how to support their partner in learning more about themselves, learning to be more present, maybe joining a men's group?
Most women have gotten the programming or the belief that they need to be responsible for their man's pleasure, and they need to help him grow and they need to help him feel good and they need to do X, Y, and Z, da, 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 da. And that can create some problems, So one thing that I would say is that it might sound a little counterintuitive, but if a woman is really wanting to grow in sexual relationship with their partner, like it can be an amazing thing for the woman to start their own personal self-pleasure exploration practice and just start playing with what feels good to you. Like, what do you like? What do you like in your body without thinking about how is this going to please my man? What kind of touch do you like? What kind of penetration do you like? What kind of sounds do you like to make? Like, go on a journey like that and really start to find this out and let this blossom and unfold. And then, and I say similar things to men too, but then from that place, you can start to bring that into your sexual experiences. And that's going to start to what's the word? I don't know the word, but I'm seeing like almost a visual of you start doing that and then you start having this mist or aura or something around you that then you start to carry with you. And all of a sudden your man looks at you differently and they're like, whoa, you are turned on. Like, I like this version of you. Wow, what's going on here? Like, I want to fuck you or I want to make love to you or, you know.
I love it. One of the videos I want to make is feminine beauty from the man's perspective. And if we take a look at amazingly beautiful woman who is closed sexually, and a woman who has average beauty but is turned on and juicy, most men are going to go for the juicy one versus the beauty.
That's certainly true for me now. It would have been less true for me when I was really watching porn all the time and addicted to porn.
This is where you grew and you are more full in who you are, and partially because you've learned to not lose your authority or collapse into porn or collapse into shame or collapse into not knowing how to approach women.
So I dance a lot, and sometimes even still to this day, like when I think about approaching a woman on a dance floor, I still get that like little like piece of me from middle school or high school that's like, oh no, what if she says no? It's like a little piece of the experience that's still in there, but it's exciting for me. And now I've like, oh, it doesn't matter if she says no. Like ultimately that's a skill that I think all men really should learn, is like how to receive a no.
Would you encourage men to practice being rejected? And of course, I would say gently, not as a way, not the way some teenagers do it, where they intentionally go and talk to girls in a way that is offensive so they get rejected. But do you sense that for a man, the learning and playing with rejection, so that basically doesn't matter anymore is an important skill and presence to grow.
Learning how to receive a no and still be in caring connection afterwards. Like that's huge. Like one of the biggest problems out there right now in the dating world is when a man receives a no, a lot of times he'll get upset and he'll get frustrated and he'll get angry at the woman. And that's not useful. That's not skillful even. And I think ultimately on some level, the men who are doing that know that that's not their ideal, but they're caught off guard by their own emotionality, and they can't, in those moments, they don't have a better option, you know? And so I think that it's very important for us to learn how to be okay with rejection. And it's interesting. It's like you can practice that to an extent. Like I could go out downtown and practice approaching people that I find attractive to try to start up conversations. And there's a different thing that happens when there's somebody who, or some situation that I'm like legitimately like, ooh, this person is intriguing to me. I would love to get to know them. Like because there's a vulnerability there. And that's really where you get the opportunity to practice, is where you're asking from this place of like, ooh, I really desire that, or I desire to know more. And then when a no comes to that place, like then how do you react? Like it's very easy to get a no if you don't care. If you're like, and I mean that in the sense of like, if you feel very flippant about it, or you're like, whatever, it doesn't fucking matter. It's just a random woman on the street. Like, of course that's going to be easier than if you're legitimately interested in somebody and they say no. But that's where the work is.
Wonderful. Well, Taylor, please keep up the good work.
Thank you. And thanks so much for having me here. And thanks for the juicy conversation. We got into a lot of really great stuff. And thank you, listener or viewer, if you're watching this wherever the video is. Like, thanks for being here.
Here are a couple of videos that Taylor made to support men in their growth. And here are a couple I made. Most importantly, the work is worth it.